The Australian government has been called upon to end electric car subsidies. There's some very, very powerful forces at work in Australia, and they're trying to slow down uptake of electric cars. You can imagine why, right? Most electric cars are either made in China or sold by Chinese car companies, one or the other. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. I'm Sam Evans. You're watching the Electric Viking, and I've got to tell you the honest truth. Some people have found out that I am pro EV, very much, 100% EV. And I often criticize hybrids and I get slammed for doing it. I receive so many emails, oh, you just hate hybrids. I don't actually hate them. I just think that most of the time the EV is a better option and it's not going to be obsolete within a couple of years' time. But anyway, I'm telling you now, I do get a lot of criticism for this stuff, and people don't, unfortunately, some people have figured out where I live, and this has led to some issues. But anyhow, the Australian government's independent advisory body, the Productivity Commission, has called for an end to incentives for electric cars. Citing the implementation of the new vehicle efficiency standards, the Productivity Commission has suggested that incentives for EV buyers, like fringe benefits tax, exemptions, and stamp duty reductions, should be eliminated. The report is part of a larger study examining Australia's goal of achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Now, I would have thought to achieve net zero carbon emissions, you would need to adopt electric cars faster. I wonder who is sponsoring this report. And honestly, there's often things going on behind closed doors. But I should point out, if you don't believe this, then this is a fact. The Australian government, it subsidises fossil fuels by literally tens of billions of dollars every year. In fact, some say hundreds of billions, depending on the report you read. Far more money still goes into fossil fuels than renewable energy in terms of subsidies. That kind of tells you some worrying stuff. While praising the Productivity Commission's calls to introduce emissions reduction incentives for heavy commercial vehicles, the EVC criticised the report's findings, calling for an end to EV incentives. In other words, the Electric Vehicle Council says this is madness. In a statement released by the Electric Vehicle Council, EVC CEO Julie Delvecchio said, the Commission's report gets one thing right and one thing very, very wrong. It rightly recommends targeted support for zero emissions trucks. By the way, in China, trucks have hit 25%. Electric trucks are now 25% market share. She says, but then it inexplicably turns around and proposes scrapping the very incentives that are finally helping everyday Australians afford an EV. Delvecchio claims that removing electric vehicle incentives is a backward step in the adoption of EVs in Australia. And of course it is. It makes complete sense. Under the NVES program, car makers are penalised for selling high-emission vehicles and can receive credits for cars that meet low-emission criteria. The program does not directly target consumers. However, brands may elect to pass on penalties in the form of price rises or use credits to offset the penalties from vehicles that don't meet emissions targets. The Productivity Commission's identification of the NVES as a stamp of approval for clean vehicles will see the very direct incentives in place currently scrapped in favour of a less consumer direct system. In an interim report, the Productivity Commission said, now that the Australian government has implemented the new vehicle efficiency standard, it should phase out the exemption of electric vehicles from the fringe benefits tax, and state and territory governments should phase out the exemption of electric vehicles from vehicle stamp duty and registration discounts. I find all this mad because, almost all of Australia's current car fleet is still internal combustion powered. And every day I'm having to make sure my vehicle recirculation is on only recirculate air from the cabin back to the cabin. Because if you don't do that, you're just getting all this, and you can smell it. You can smell all these diesel cars in particular that have, the fumes cause cancer. And no one's actually even arguing with that. Even the most moronic idiots realize that's true. And that this is the case, right? So if we want to slow down, right, the movement to EVs, we are basically continuing to increase. Cancer rates in Australia have never been higher. They've never been growing faster. And this is considered One of the biggest reasons, vehicle emissions. I don't understand the logic behind this. It's almost like that philosophy, well, if it hasn't happened to me, I don't care, right? If I don't have it, if I'm not dealing with it, if it's not someone close to me being affected by it, I don't care. And I think that's what a lot of people, how they think. Currently, the only national incentive available to electric vehicle owners is the fringe benefits tax exemption applied to the vehicles which are priced below the luxury car tax threshold and operated under a novated lease. So the incentives are really they're not even in place for most people. It is not available to all EV owners, such as those operating self-leased or privately purchased EVs or vehicles that exceed the $91,000 efficient vehicle LCT threshold. There's a lot of cars that still have to pay luxury car tax that are electric cars, which is ridiculous. Discounts on stamp duty and registration are not nationally managed and are implemented by state and territory governments and vary by location. If we want to see more EVs on our roads and reduce emissions, we need to do much more. We need to increase EV uptake, and that means expanding purchase incentives like the electric car discount and state-based discounts, not removing them, said the Electric Vehicle Council. Rather than recommending removing the very limited amount of EV incentives we have, they're saying, actually, we should do exactly the opposite. Suggesting we end incentives just as Australia finally catches up to the rest of the developed world, which we haven't done, with an efficiency standard is short-sighted. We need both. They work together, not in isolation. Guys, what are your thoughts? Do you agree? Do you disagree? I feel like Australia is still a long way behind a lot of the developed world when it comes to EV uptake. The UK is at 23%. Sweden's at 40% EV only. Norway's 97%. Many European countries are well over 30-40%. Even the United States is further ahead of us than we are. EV sales in the last month, we have numbers for, we're only just under 7% of all cars. A lot of Australians are still afraid of EVs. It's change, it's different. They're still afraid of them. And for these people, an incentive might just help them to say, well, hang on a minute, maybe I shouldn't be scared. Maybe this is not something to be scared about. Now, guys, I suggest to everyone, encourage your friends, and family to buy an electric car. A lot of people really are scared. They really think you can't plug them in at home. They think that you need all these special things and you need to install the new charger and it's going to cost you $10,000. I've heard all this stuff from people. It's craziness. So if you've got any friends and they're going to buy a car, encourage them to get an electric one.